Alright, so good morning, students. Alright, right. So reproduction is what we will be looking at. This one's for reproduction. We're actually going to look at reproduction in living organisms, which of course would include animal and human being would fall under that category. And we're also going to look at reproduction as it relates to plants. So as for reproduction, no, of course, this concept shouldn't have been new to the class because you should have been exposed to reproduction from primary school. So as for reproduction, in a nutshell, in its simplest form, it is basically the process or a procedure by which an organism basically generate a new organism of that same species or that same kind. Now, as to reproduction, now of course there are two types of reproduction. We have one that is known as asexual reproduction, and we have sexual reproduction. So those are the two types. Now, both of them do the same thing in terms of the main concept, and that is to form, of course, a new organism, but in basically in two different ways. As for asexual reproduction, um, plants, most plants, are some plants, of course, reproduce via or by asexual reproduction. Now, the main difference between sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction is simple that as for asexual reproduction, only one parent is normally needed, whereas for sexual reproduction, we normally have two parent, one of course which must be a male and the other must be a female. Now, of course, there are advantages and disadvantages between the two types of reproduction. As for the first point that they are saying that um, asexual reproduction does not involve the fusion of sex cells. So human being, for example, the only way human being can reproduce is by the two is by the nucleus of the two sex cells joining together, which of course would be the nucleus from the sperm fusing with the nucleus from the egg. So parents of parts of the parents, of course, will form the offspring, and the parts they are talking about would be the sex cell. Only one parent is needed, and as I said before, this is a difference between asexual and sexual reproduction. In that for asexual reproduction, only one parent is needed. Now, cane, for example, for those persons who know cane, let's say for example you cut a cane and you plant the top, then that top basically within a year will actually produce more than one cane suckers, and of course which would develop into mature cane so you can eat. Now you will realize that it is not like it was a situation where you would see those cane um, mating to actually produce a new cane sucker. So that plant is an example of a plant that of course reproduce um, asexually. That means only one parent is needed. Are the newborn or the cane sucker actually formed from part of the parent? That's what those two pointers are talking about whenever they said that part of the parent form the offspring. Planting and banana, for example, you plant one banana sucker, one planting sucker, all of a sudden within months, you actually find more than one suckers within that particular root. And it's not like you have two plantings mating to actually form those new suckers. Those new suckers actually form of part of the original or the parent sucker. So That's what they mean when they said that only one parent is needed, and the offspring normally form from part of the parent, of course. Now, as for the advantages of asexual reproduction, they are saying that this process normally allow reproduction to take place in large amount and of course very quickly. So reproducing large amount very quickly. So in terms of human being, for example, that reproduce sexually, you will realize that um, a female can only get pregnant once within a 9 months period. Now comparing that female versus you planting a planting. Within 9 months, if you should plant a planting sucker, within 9 months, when you should visit where you would have planted that planting sucker, I'm sure that you will see at least four different suckers shooting up from the root of where you would have planted that planting sucker. So that's what they mean when they said that they actually reproduce in large amount and also very quickly. So that's an advantage for asexual reproduction. The second advantage is saying that there's no need to search for a mate. So what they are saying, if that planting sucker decide to reproduce some more planting suckers, then there not gonna be any time spent for that planting sucker to go and find a next planting sucker to reproduce. It actually just reproduce on its own. So that's what they mean when they said that there is no need to search for a mate. The next pointer or the next advantage, the desirable characteristic can be artificially breed into a population. So what they mean is that basically if you have one planting sucker, within 2 years, within 3 years, you can actually have a lot of planting suckers because they just keep on reproducing. And the fact that they reproduce in large amount mean that very quickly you will actually have at your disposal a lot of those planting suckers. The last advantage at the top there, farmers can now produce high yield or disease resistant crops and livestock. Now, in terms of farmers, let's say for example, you have a type of planting sucker where that one produce a lot of fingers or a lot of hands on the planting, and the planting them they normally larger than usual. What they are saying is that if you is actually a farmer, you will be able to continuously have this type of planting sucker on your farm. So that's a good thing with plants that reproduce asexually. Let's say for example you have the best of the best. Once you take care of them, then you will continuously having just that type that maybe for example resistant to disease, or for example it actually produce a whole lot whenever it is bearing. It is not like human being, for example, that reproduce sexually where let's say for example your parent have 5 children, two of them good in terms of behavior, etc., and the next three them actually some one get trouble, one thief, etc. So as for asexual reproduction, if the plant for example is a plant that produce high yield and good quality, then it's going to continuously produce good quality. Likewise for sexual reproduction, there is no there is no guarantee that all of the offspring or all of the newborn will be the same. There will always be differences, or what is known as variation. So so as for advantages and disadvantages for sexual reproduction, there is normally what is called variation. That simply means that if If a man and a woman, of course, have 5 kids, then they are actually different in 5 different ways. So that is what is known as variation. But as for asexual reproduction, we don't normally there is what is known as lack of variation. So if it is high yield being produced in terms of food and disease resistant produce in terms of food, then that is what it will be. Now, and the opposite side of that now, you will also have some plants that they just produce poor quality. So they will of course continuously producing that poor quality, which for example will not be resistant to certain condition. Because the American apples, for example, one of the main reasons why those apples you're not seeing them grown out here is because of our climatic condition, where our condition kind of too warm for it. Because those American apples, they actually like cool conditions. So that's why you're not seeing such plants grown out here. So that have to do with the same variation, mean that they only resistant or they can only survive within a particular environment. Likewise, human being, for example, the fact that we're different in different ways, we can survive in different environment because there is what is known as variation. So those are some advantages for the asexual reproduction. As for disadvantages, of course, there are some. So they are saying all the offspring are clones. What they mean is that all of the same features that the parent plant would have, for example, the planting and the cane, all the offspring are all the new plants that will come up as newborn for that plant will have the same characteristics, will have the same features. So they are not different. So they are clones. When you clone something, you basically make a photocopy of, or you make an exact copy of. So they are saying that that is a disadvantage, and it can be a disadvantage in the sense that, let's say, for example, that plant can only survive in cold condition. Then if you carry that plant in hot or warmer condition, it will not survive. But let's say, for example, it was a situation where there is variation, where they are not clones, then of course they will be able to differentiate and survive in different conditions because they would have the different features from the parent, for example. So it is a disadvantage in that sense, meaning that they have the same replica, they have the same feature as the parent, and they are all of the same in terms of clones. And that will lead us to the second point where it is saying that a poor quality parent, which is the parent plant, will produce a poor quality offspring. Right. Sometimes we normally use, let's say, for example, pumpkin. Sometimes when you eat pumpkin or whenever somebody is cooking pumpkin, you hear them say the pumpkin is water. That means that it have a lot of water. It is not dry and it don't nice whenever you're actually eating it. Now, if you should plant that pumpkin seed, then you're gonna actually get the same quality in terms of the pumpkin water. So that is why when somebody give you a piece of pumpkin and you realize say pumpkin dry, you actually try to replant that seed, because there is of course almost a guarantee that you will get back that good quality in terms of that dry pumpkin. And the same thing goes for other plants, for example, gungo, where some gungo, the pods actually having more grain. So, for example, some gungo you have like all up to 7 different grain in one pod, while others you only have 3. So once you continuously replant the one that have 7, then you will always get gungo of that quality in terms of having so many grains in it versus the one that actually having a smaller amount. Alright, so somebody is asking the question, how does sperm goes into the ovary? That somebody person is asking the question on YouTube. Down the sperm actually able to penetrate that egg once it actually ejaculates. So once it is present, then it is able to actually penetrate it. Right. So in terms of the last point, I know they are saying that there is a lack of variation, and that is simply because of the fact that there would be a clone. As for sexual reproduction now, as for this one, they are saying that normally it requires two parents, and one of which must be a male, and the male, of course, will actually be the one that will provide the sperm, and the other, of course, which must be the female, which will provide the egg. So male sex cell is called the sperm, while the female sex cell is called the egg, otherwise known as the ovum. So normally the two sex cells must join during a process that is known as fertilization. And in terms of joining, it is not the two sex cells that literally join. It is just a part of the two sex cells, which of course would be section that is known as the nucleus. So the nucleus from this sperm generally join with the nucleus from the egg. Now the image that you're seeing on the screen, it is actually showing an egg that it is trying to be fertilized by sperms. Now surrounding that single egg, you actually will have millions of sperm. But in terms of succeeding, in terms of fertilizing the egg, only one sperm can actually do that at a particular time. Meaning that once one of the sperm fertilize the egg, then the egg automatically produce a chemical that will destroy all of the other sperms that will actually try to fertilize that egg that would have already fertilized. Now the egg, once it is fertilized, then they don't call it egg anymore. It is known as a zygote. So once it is fertilized, and we don't call it an egg, it is known as a zygote. Alright, so moving on, let's see if we can look at some advantages for this type of reproduction. Now the first point is saying that the offspring, which of course is the newborns, they are different. So they are different both from each other and to parents. So let's say, for example, you have a family where you have mother, father, and two kids. Now, those four individuals, they are different in four different ways. So what they are saying is that the two children, they will be different from each other, and they will also be different from both parents. So that is what is known as variation. So the fact that there are so much differences simply mean that they can survive in different conditions, and of course they are of different personalities. As I would have said before, some would have bad fall, some would have more good fall than others. But the good thing is that there are differences. So let's say, for example, the parent don't have to worry say boy one of the pitney bad and the next one I go bad. So at least there's differences in terms of personality. So that normally be a advantage in terms of looking at what is known as variation. The second pointer, it produces variation in the offspring, so organisms gradually change or, of course, evolve. So the good thing about that is that adaptation now come into play where persons can adapt to different environment. There will also be a proportion of organism which can survive unfavorable changes, that mean in terms of weather, so the population is less likely to die out. So let's say, for example, it would sexual reproduction, for example, would take place in plant in most plant than normal. Because yes, sexual reproduction take place in plant, but not as often as the asexual. Then the American apple, for example, then some of them would be able to survive in Jamaica because variation would have exist, but that is not the case. So as for the advantages, we can see that yes, there are some advantages of sexual reproduction, and one of the main one is simply because of what is known as that variation, which simply means that persons or the organisms can adapt to different environment as it comes. A disadvantage now, mating partners must be available. So that simply means that the only way a female, for example, can get pregnant, or the only way a male can get a newborn, is by vice versa, finding the opposite sex. So that's a disadvantage. Fewer offspring are produced, and that is why I would have used the example where I said that within any 9 months period, a female can only get pregnant once. So that is much fewer in terms of reproduction in comparison to you planting a cane or you planting a banana or planting sucker. Within 9 months of planting any one of those plants, I'm quite sure that you will be able to get more than one offspring or more than one newborn from that original one that you would have planted. When you hear the term offspring, we're talking about a newborn, or that new individual, or that new plant or part that would have been reproduced from the parent. So that's a disadvantage where they're saying that fewer offspring are normally produced. So in terms of looking at reproduction again, as for the definition, the process by which new organisms are generated. So whether it is living things in terms of animal, or if we're talking about plants. So in looking at the definition, basically they are saying that they are of two types in terms of reproduction, where you have sexual and of course asexual. And the main difference between these two types of reproduction is that as for the asexual, only one parent is needed, while for the sexual reproduction, two is necessary, where of course those two individuals will provide a sex cell. One of course will be the sperm and the other will be the egg. Then of course both of them come with their advantages and disadvantages. So after looking at those two types of reproduction, we're now gonna spend some time looking at the organs that comprise or that make up the sexual reproduction for both male and female in terms of the reproductive organs. So on the screen now is the male reproductive system in terms of the main organs. We have the testes, are otherwise known as testicles, and of course the penis. So they are saying that the testes and penis, these two parts, they are external structures. So these are normally seen on the outer part of the male anatomy or the male body. In terms of production, where the sperm is manufactured, so they are saying that the testes are the testicles, normally responsible for producing sperm, and the hormone that is called testosterone. So testosterone, it is a chemical, it is a hormone that is mostly produced by a male body or in male. Now what this hormone does is that it actually instruct the human body to have a deeper voice, to have ear growing more on the body. That's why you'll actually find more ear on a male body versus a female, and the vice for a male normally deeper than female. And testosterone is also the hormone that allow sperm to actually produce. So yes, you will find some female that actually have testosterone in their system. Now these females, their voice normally deep, and they normally have ear on their skin more than normal. Now testosterone, it is also a banned substance, meaning that track and field, at least for example, can take this hormone. And generally when the female at least take these hormone, they don't start to develop some male features. Let's say for example deepen of voice, and ears start to grow, like for example under their cheek. So this hormone, it is mainly produced in male. Only the male reproductive system produce it. But as for some female, naturally they will actually born with the capability of producing some a small amount. But once that female have that capability, then of course they will actually have some slightly male feature where the voice deep, and in terms of ear and their skin, they kind of have more in comparison to a normal female. Alright, the scrotal sac. Um, Now the scrotal sac, that is what we normally call the balls, or the seed bag. So this normally holds the testes in place. So looking at the image, as you can see the testes. So in terms of holding it in place, we commonly call it the seed bag. That's what we commonly call it. Now in terms of its functionality, very important. So they are saying that this section normally keep the testes about 2 degrees less than normal body temperature. So what they are saying is that generally the testes, the temperature for the testes normally approximately 2 degrees lower than the your entire body temperature. So let's say for example your body temperature is 38 degrees Celsius, then the temperature as for the testes will be 36 degrees Celsius thereabout. So it's normally lower. And one of the reasons why it is lower is that the sperm in terms of temperature, they like to have a slightly lower temperature than the rest of the body. Epididymis, that's next section looking at the diagram. The epididymis is actually located behind the testes, and its function is to actually store sperm. So the testes is what produce the sperm or what made the sperm, but that's not where the sperm is actually stored. It is actually stored in a section that is known as the epididymis. So all those these parts that we're looking at, of course, in terms of labeling the male reproductive organ, you should be able to label those major parts, and in terms of their functions, of course, you should be able to give or state their functions. The vas deferens, now its function, they are saying that it transports sperm from epididymis to an area where the prostate gland and seminal vesicle meet. So the vas deferens, it is also known as the sperm duct. So it is this long tube that run from the epididymis and go all the way up. So see labeled here as the sperm duct. So the sperm duct is the same thing as the vas deferens, just a change of term. So its function basically is to transport sperm. That's its function there. The seminal vesicles and the prostate glands. So the seminal vesicle produce a thick sticky fluid, and that fluid is what is known as the semen. So the semen is that fluid that normally ejaculate out. So it is within that semen that the sperm will be located. So yes, semen can actually ejaculate or come out, but there can be absent in terms of sperm. Because let's say, for example, the male is not able to produce sperm, then yes, the male still will ejaculate. It is just that the sperm will it is just that the ejaculation or the semen, it will not contain any sperm, and once there is no sperm, then that semen is infertile, mean that it will not be able to get a female pregnant. So what normally is seen with the naked eye is that is not the sperm. It is known as the semen, because the sperm, they are so small you cannot see them with your naked eye. So as for the prostate gland, now normally secrete a tiny milky fluid, and that also have to do with the semen. Now movement of the sperm in terms of it moving from point A to point B. So during ejaculation, the sperm cells leave the epididymis and flow through the vas deferens, that is also known as the sperm duct, towards the penis, which of course would be an external structure. So once that would have taken place, then the semen, once there is an egg that is present, then of course the semen, which would contain the sperm, now would cause that fusion to take place, that is known as fertilization. So the structure now, so looking at sperm in terms of the different parts, so it basically have three main parts. It have the middle section, it have the tail, and of course it have the head. So the head, that is where the nucleus is, and you look at the diagram, you will see the blue section here. That is of course a nucleus, because as I would have said before, the sperm don't join the egg entirely. It is actually the nucleus of the sperm that normally join with the nucleus of the egg, and that is what is called a zygote, and the zygote is what will eventually develop into a fetus, and then of course embryo. The tip of the head contain a small sac that is called the acrosome, and the acrosome, it basically contain a hydraulic enzyme, and this enzyme is very important in terms of its survival. Mitochondria generate energy, And with your knowledge of normal body cells, you will remember that the mitochondria is a part of the cell that is responsible for releasing energy. Right, so that is where energy normally release in a normal cell in the mitochondria. So once it needs some energy, now that's where the energy will actually release. And the energy is really needed simply because it is the only way it can move from point A to point B, because it have to move for it to do what it's supposed to do in terms of functionality. So in terms of movement, swimming, it is the tail that normally allow it to actually move. Alright, so I'm looking at the other one now, as in the other organ, which of course would be the female reproductive organ. So the female reproductive organ normally make the female sex cell, which would be the egg or the ovum. Because when they want to mention the term sex cell, person should be aware of which one is called the female one and which one is called the male one. As for the function of it now, that's what the second pointer is now saying, where they are saying that it receive the sperm cell from male for fertilization. So the reproductive organ for the female actually does that in terms of receiving. It maintains an environment that is suitable for what is known as implantation of an embryo. And looking at the image here, now the section that is known as the uterus, that is where the embryo normally develop, or the baby normally develop. So it normally implant itself there. So there must be a suitable environment that must be maintained. And that environment or condition, it should have a rich supply in terms of blood. And the reason why the uterus should have a rich supply of blood is simply because the only way the developing fetus or the developing baby can get all of the nutrients that it needs to mature enough so that birth can be given is they will actually get it from the blood. Because remember that in the womb of the female, they cannot, it's not like they can drink water or they can eat food. So in terms of the nutrients, the only way they can get these nutrients is by the rich supply of blood, which will be in the uterus. Also, it should be comfortable in the sense that there should be a lot of tissues, a lot of soft tissues within this area. And having so much soft tissues will actually provide cushioning for that developing baby. Because remember that the female will be moving around, So that whole lot of vibration can be dangerous or it can damage or hurt the developing fetus. But because the condition is right, then there will not be that effect. Now, some females have the problem where, yes, they will get pregnant, but in terms of carrying the baby for 9 months, their body is unable to do so. So they always lose the baby. So it is not like they don't get pregnant. It is just that their body don't have the ability to actually maintain that condition for 9 months or 7, 8 months. Because the only way the baby can develop maturely and properly is by that condition maintained, where there is always a rich supply in terms of blood. But some female bodies, for whatever reasons or for hormone imbalance, their body just cannot maintain that good condition that is needed for the entire 9 months. So hence, they normally just always lose the baby after a few months. So they are saying that that environment now will provide everything needed for the development of the fetus. So the fetus is basically what is known as the baby. So delivery, so deliver baby to the outside world. So the female reproductive organ basically have that function, in that it is what is responsible for ensuring that the baby is being delivered to the outside world. The female reproductive system, the parts of the female reproductive system are located in a region that is known as the pelvic region. And of course, we have the different parts that have their different functions. So it is a must that, of course, you know their functions and also the ability to label the different section. The ovary, and as for the ovary, so a female normally have two ovaries, one on the right, one on the left. And looking at the image, the larger image actually showing you one ovary, while the image at the top showing you an ovary on the right and an ovary on the left. So as for the ovary, this is where eggs are produced. The site for a hormone that is called oestrogen production. So oestrogen, it is a hormone that normally basically prepare the walls of the uterus for fertilization, or if you want to say for pregnancy. So oestrogen is normally a hormone that prepare it. So about 10,000 ovary present at birth. So what they are saying is that when a female is born as a baby, that means that the female just born. They are saying that at birth, that female basically born with approximately 10,000 eggs in your body. So as female normally born with approximately 10,000 eggs. But in terms of maturity or maturing, only about 400 normally mature. And those 400 normally mature start from about age 12, age 13 thereabout, and that is what is known as puberty, straight up to approximately anywhere between age 45 and 50. That is why there is something that is called menopause. When a female reaches menopause, that simply means that she is not able to release any more egg. That simply means that all the mature eggs that her body is able to produce actually basically finish. So that's what they are saying. So females, only about 400 of the 10,000 eggs that they're born with eventually are mature. So that is why females, in terms of puberty is whenever the female now start to release the egg, or when the female start to see her period. And that normally start take place anywhere from age 11, age 12, thereabout. And that normally lasts up to approximately anywhere between age 45 and age 50. So the ova is also known as egg. So ova develop inside a section that is known as the follicles. So the mature follicle is called the Graafian follicle. So once the egg is ripe, then that's when it normally release. So when they ripe, it moves to the ovary's surface. And looking at the diagram, that's what it is actually showing. So here they label it as mature ovum release. So once mature ovum is released in terms of the egg there, if fertilization going to take place, then the nucleus of the ovum that you're looking at there is what will fuse with the nucleus from the sperm that of course would come from the male. Alright, so in terms of fertilization, so egg, they said that the egg can live for 3 to 4 days after ovulation. Now ovulation is normal the releasing of the egg. So once the egg is released from the ovary, that process is called ovulation. And once the egg is released, they are saying that the egg can live, I mean, anywhere between 3 to, of course, 4 days. That is generally speaking, as there are times when the egg can live slightly longer. It moves along what is called the oviduct by beating of something that is called the cilia. So the cilia help to push it along what is known as the oviduct. And this is actually the oviduct. All of this channel that you're seeing here that actually move from the ovary. So this is the ovary. So the oviduct is also known as the fallopian tube. So the egg would release by the ovary there and go the direction that you are seeing the arrows. So it is within this fallopian tube or within the oviduct that the sperm would actually meet the egg and cause that process that is known as fertilization. Right, so as for fertilization, it is normally the joining or the fusion of the sperm with an ovum, and this normally occurs or this normally take place basically in the oviduct or the fallopian tube, that same tube that we just looked at. And in terms of exactly where fertilization take place, it is approximately right there where you're seeing it, and we normally say 3/4 way up the fallopian tube. That's where fertilization normally take place. Alright, so once fertilization take place, there is a process that is known as implantation. And as for implantation, that's where the fertilized egg normally plants its way into the walls of the uterus so it can develop. Because the only way the fertilized egg can develop, I mean, a healthy baby, is by it plant itself. That means it actually sink itself into the walls of the uterus. And the reason why it do that is simply because of the rich supply of blood there. Because as I would have said before, the blood is what the developing uterus is where the developing fetus or the developing baby will get all its nutrients and just about anything that it need to actually survive or to develop into a fully blown baby. Now the hormone that is known as progesterone, this hormone is very important, and this is the hormone that actually maintain the wall of the uterus. So this hormone, it is very important. So some females that are unable to actually carry the pregnancy for 9 months, when they have this problem, it can be as a result of their body not producing enough hormones. As if the hormone, if the hormone is not producing, then the environment is not going to be able to maintain. And that's where we have a problem. When the environment is not maintaining the uterus there, then the baby cannot develop properly, of course. So as for the pregnancy, they are saying that the thick wall of the uterus is called the placenta, right? So there's a part that is called the placenta. Looking at the diagram, the one down the bottom where you have the baby upside down, the red section that you're seeing there is what is known as the placenta. And as you can see, they are saying that it has a rich blood supply that is stimulated by these two hormones, oestrogen and progesterone. So here we have a larger image that you can look at now. So looking at the image, you will see what is labeled as the placenta there. So they are saying that the placenta is formed mainly from the embryo and partly from the mother's tissue. Right. So the placenta, it is a compilation of parts from the mother itself and of course from the developing embryo. So there is no joining of the maternal and fetal red blood cells. So what they are saying is that the blood from the mother and the blood from the fetus, as for those red blood cells, there is no joining. They don't mix up with each other. There is a separation. So there is something that separates them. So the thin layer of cells act as a barrier separating maternal and fetal red blood cell. So the maternal red blood cell, that is the red blood cell from the mother herself, while the fetal red blood cell would be the red blood cell for the fetus. So they are saying that we don't have these two different types of red blood cell mixing, and that is simply because, let's say for example, in the mother's red blood cell there are some chemicals that can harm the fetus. Then the fact that those two red blood cells don't mix would simply mean that they will not be passed on to the fetus. However, they are saying that there are some substances, even though there is a barrier, these substances still can go across from the maternal blood, which is the female blood, to the blood of the fetus. So nicotine, which is a chemical that is found in cigarette smoking or marijuana smoking, alcohol can also go across, and of course drugs. So they are saying that once these go across, then they can form some form of damages or harm to the developing fetus or embryo. And that is why female normally being asked that once they are pregnant, they must not smoke, they must not drink. And this is the reason, simply because these substances can actually go across and affect the developing fetus. Now, in terms of how these substances normally affect the baby during pregnancy, it can affect their nervous system, and their nervous system mean them brain. So some of the time when you have some classmate or some family member where they just do some stupid things, like I said, boy, they're not normal, it can be as a result of this, where during pregnancy their mother used to smoke or drink, so it affect their thinking ability. So you know, literally mad them mad. It is just that their nervous system or their brain, in terms of development, would have been affected by these chemicals. So nutrients and oxygen normally diffuse from the maternal blood capillaries to the embryo. So maternal blood would be the blood for the female. So the nutrients that the embryo need and the nutrients and the oxygen that the embryo need, the developing embryo cannot get these from the atmosphere or from the outside world. The embryo would have to depend on the mother to actually do that. So carbon dioxide and other waste materials that the embryo normally produce, now these now need to move from the embryo and go into the mother's blood, and then the mother now will excrete them or get them out of the human body. So in terms of the placenta, so the placenta is like an exchange section there where the useful substances that the embryo need to get from the mother go across from the placenta, and the waste materials that are produced from the embryo go across from the placenta into the maternal blood. So it is like a exchange point. Alright, so there's a cord that is known as the umbilical cord, and it is the remainder of the umbilical cord that is known as the navel string. So that long cord, so you are seeing the cord that runs from the abdominal or the belly section of the fetus and attached to the placenta. So the umbilical cord, that's what normally form the navel of an individual once it is cut. So this cord is what normally carries nutrients, and of course the nutrients would come from the mother, and it also carry waste from the developing fetus to the mother so that the mother can get it out. Amnion, it is a fluid. The amnion, it produces something that is called the amniotic fluid. Going back to the diagram, if you look at the labeling, now surrounding this fetus is a fluid that is known as the amniotic fluid. So when just before birth, now the female, there is normally something that is called a breaking of the water, where the female might feel some fluid running down her legs. Now that would be whenever the amniotic fluid break just before birth. Now this amniotic fluid, it is very important to surround the developing fetus, because it is what helps to cushion the baby during pregnancy, because the female is always moving around. That whole lot of vibration can have damaging effect on the developing fetus. So the amniotic fluid normally absorb the shock. So that whole lot of vibration, the amniotic fluid normally cushion it, so prevent so much vibration from taking place. So the amnion is what produces the amniotic fluid. Now there are some NBs in terms of the whole pregnancy process. There are some note briefly. So a fetus move its limbs from the age of about 16 weeks. That's about 4 or 16. So about 4 months within the pregnancy, a female would actually start to feel some form of movement. So the limbs mean the arms, and the legs, that's what the limbs mean. So after 2 months, the human formation, or the human shape, start to be recognizable. So what they are saying, that fertilized egg, it start now to shape or look like a human being within that time period. At 3 months, they are saying that if that female should do an ultrasound, then the sex or the gender can be identified. That is, if it is a male or a female. And of course, birth normally occur or take place about 9 months. But of course, as early as 7 months, 7.5, 8 months, a female can give birth to baby. And baby, of course, will be healthy. It is just that a 7-month-old versus a 9-month-old, there's a difference in terms of size and weight. So if the baby is born 8 months, then generally the baby is smaller than the ones, and also lighter than the ones that would born at 9 months, for example. Yes, I'm hearing you. hmm Yes, I'm hearing you. Yes. Yeah. Yes. 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 Write that off. Yeah. All right. So in terms of right. So in terms of notes now, say, and you have those that I would have gone through today I have that notes also. So in terms of that concept, I'm gonna stop at that concept there. As for next concept that we'll pick up would be the birth process, because in terms of the female giving birth, we have different steps. So we have those to look at in terms of the birth process. After that, then we should move on to different contraceptive methods. Um, we have menstrual cycle to look at also as it relates to reproduction. We have different diseases or different health problems that affect the different reproductive system. Now, in terms of now, please remember to mark your names in the WhatsApp platform, so indicate that you're present. And I have some students, I have persons who, of course, are saying that they are present in WhatsApp, but I'm not seeing them on the Google Classroom at all. I'm not seeing those persons. I don't know. They don't have access to. You don't have access to Google Classroom. So you don't have a you don't have an account. Okay, so in terms of the test, then I'm gonna. So what are you? The fact that you're on the meeting, which you're using a Gmail account. Oh, okay, okay. So in terms of the testing, that means say, I definitely would have to provide you with the exact link for the test, because I'm gonna give you a test this week. Well, a graded work which will be posted up. But when that time comes, I will surely ensure that you actually get access to it. Alright, so students have a productive day. In terms of the notes, I'm gonna send it in a different format, because I would have only posted it in PowerPoint format. So I'm gonna put it in the PDF format and also in the image format. So and we're sure that everybody at least have access to it in terms of being able to open the notes. So have a productive day, and you can get ready for your next class. Okay, bye. Yeah, bye.